What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another Legal Hands to the Face podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bill Colarulo. These Sundays in the offseason are getting more and more difficult without NFL football. But thankfully, the NFL news really goes all year long, and we are already at the Combine. February 28th, the NFL Combine starts in Indianapolis, and then it's right into free agency March 15th, and the draft will be here before you know it. But if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, there is one big lingering question that needs to be addressed this offseason, and that is, what do we do with Jalen Hurts? He is in the fourth year of his rookie deal, which is the final year. I see a lot of people saying, hey, why can't they exercise his fifth-year option? He was not a first-round draft pick, so there is no fifth-year option. He was drafted in the second round. So this is the final year of his deal. And you know the Eagles and probably Jalen Hurts too do not want to go into this season without a contract in place. That quarterback market is only going up, up, up. So it makes sense for the Eagles to try to lock him up. And you know Jalen would probably like the security of not having to play on the final year of his deal. So that's what I want to talk about today. But before I do, just a reminder, guys, if you like the podcast, please give us a like, give us a review, give us a subscribe on any podcast platform you're on, and check us out on social media. We post daily content, daily videos to Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. So Legal Hands to the Face on all your platforms. Give us a like, give us a follow. And if you have anything you want us to talk about, you can always contact us on those platforms or shoot me an email, bill@legalhandstotheface.com, and we'll address it in another podcast.
This is the Legal Hands to the Face podcast with Bill Colarulo.
But a lot of question marks for the Eagles. Still don't have an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator in place. They've continued to do interviews. Thought Vance Joseph was probably high on their list. He goes back to Denver, which was a little bit surprising. But that's not what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is Jalen Hurts and how much money is he going to get in this deal. Like I said, I'm sure the Eagles would like to have a deal in place sooner rather than later. With free agency starting March 15th, it will be nice to know how much money do they have to spend. Now, the NFL did increase the salary cap this year by almost $17 million. It went up $16.6 million for a total salary cap of $224.8 million. That's obviously a record high. It's never been that high before. But what do they offer Jalen Hurts? And Jalen has indicated before he wants to be paid fairly, but he also doesn't want to handcuff the team. It'd be nice for him to be able to have play pieces around him. We saw this year with the addition of A.J. Brown, with having Miles Sanders and Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith and that stud offensive line, it allows him to flourish and allows him to play really, really well. But the guy deserves to be paid, and the quarterback market is only going way up. I mean, let's just take a look. I dove into the salary numbers of all of our top quarterbacks. And if you look at the top 6 quarterbacks in the NFL, the top 6 paid quarterbacks in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers comes in at the highest annual cost per year at $50 million is his annual salary. And then right behind him is Russell Wilson at 49, Kyler Murray at 46, Deshaun Watson at 46, Patrick Mahomes at 45, and Josh Allen at $43 million. So I think it's definitely clear that this salary that Jalen Hurts has is going to be over $40 million a year. But the question marks are, how many years and what are the guarantees? Because you see these salaries getting reported and these contracts getting reported, but the most important number is the guarantees. And if you look at Deshaun Watson's deal, although it was only a 5-year deal, I say only because Patrick Mahomes has a 10-year deal, but although Deshaun Watson's was only a 5-year deal, all $230 million of Deshaun Watson's deal was guaranteed. Is that something that Jalen Hurts is looking for? Does he want full guarantees? That's a big question mark. I don't know if the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be willing to do a fully guaranteed contract. I mean, they were burned once before with the Carson Wentz contract, but I even hate the comparisons. I really do. I mean, they gave Carson Wentz a 4-year, $128 million contract, but $107 million of that was guaranteed. But I hate the comparisons because I think you're really comparing apples and oranges with Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is not a guy I think you have to worry about losing this team. Sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. There were reports about Carson Wentz not getting along with teammates, about him not being a great leader. You never hear those stories with Jalen Hurts. From the moment that kid has stepped into that locker room as a rookie up until this past season, he seems to be a natural born leader that people want to follow and want to play with. Never hear stories about him. And then you hear stories about his work ethic. He's the first one in the building. He's the last one to leave. This kid just sleeps, eats, and breathes football, studying film. So they have all the right things there. I mean, you look at Kyler Murray's contract, 5 years, $230 million, an average hit of a little over $46 million. He had $160 million guaranteed. But if you remember, they had to put that clause in there that he would spend a certain amount of hours per day studying film. And there was all types of controversy about it, and they ended up taking it out of the contract. But Jalen Hurts isn't that type of guy. They're not going to have to put clauses in there to get him to study film, to get him to be in the building. In fact, they may have to push him out of the building from all the stories that we hear about how much that guy is there. But that's going to be the big question mark is, what is the annual number? I think the annual number is going to be 50 million or more. I know that sounds crazy, but when you look at the market, although the only person right now that's at the 50 million mark is Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback market gets reset every single year when there are new contracts. And the next guy to get paid is always getting paid more than the last guy. And with the salary cap going up, it only makes sense that the quarterback's annual salaries are going to go up as well. And you hear about other guys. I mean, Daniel Jones from the New York Giants, who I would not put anywhere near Jalen Hurts. The guy played okay this past season, had his best year, but he wasn't good enough for the Giants to exercise the fifth-year option last season. So he's going to be a free agent, and the reports are that he's looking for over $45 million a year. Daniel Jones is looking for over $45 million a year. So when you hear that number, you got to be a little bit nervous if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. What the heck could Jalen Hurts be looking for? Guys like Geno Smith are going to get over $40 million a year. But one of the big issues, too, is Joe Burrow is eligible for a new contract, and Lamar Jackson is set to be a free agent. Do the Eagles try to get Hurts' deal done before Burrow and Jackson? Because if those deals come in and they reset the market at some crazy number, it really handcuffs the Eagles. You're almost forced to pay Hurts the number that he wants at that point. But again, you got to look at the guarantees. Like I said, Deshaun Watson's $230 million was fully guaranteed. Now you look at Mahomes. Mahomes is the only quarterback in the top six that has a contract that's more than 6 years. Most of them are 5 years. Josh Allen has a 6-year deal. But Mahomes has a 10-year deal with an average salary of $45 million a year. So it's a total value of $450 million. And I'm going to say only here, but only $141 million of that is guaranteed. Kind of a team-friendly deal. I mean, you look at what Patrick Mahomes does and really doesn't look like he has shown any signs of slowing down. This guy's going to be great for a really long time. I think they're probably going to be renegotiating that deal sooner rather than later because it's very, very team-friendly, but it allows these Chiefs to continue to put pieces around Patrick Mahomes. So you look at Jalen Hurts. Is he looking for a 10-year deal? Is he looking for a 5-year deal? I said on Instagram earlier this week, I really think what you're going to see is a deal come in around 7 years. I think he'll be somewhere in the middle. Not 5, not 10. I think he'll be at 7 years. I think he's going to have an average annual salary of at least $50 million. And I think you're going to see $200 million of that guaranteed. Sounds crazy, but it really isn't. When you look at these top 6 salaries that already exist, when you look at the salary cap has increased, and you look at these other guys who are going to get deals with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, and then even those subpar Daniel Jones and Geno Smiths that are getting a ton of money. But if there's anybody that can figure this out, it's Howie Roseman. And it's going to be important that they don't break the bank on Jalen, making it difficult to sign other players because they have a lot of decisions to make on that offense. And I know Jalen, like I said, he has said, I want to be able to have players around me. And they have some decisions. There's a lot of free agents in that offensive room right now. One of them is Jason Kelce. And Jason Kelce, there's been some people saying, hey, maybe he'll go to the Chiefs. That is not happening. He is not going to the Kansas City Chiefs for two reasons. Number one, this guy is going to retire a Philadelphia Eagle. But number two, the Chiefs already have a stud center. So they're not going to bring Jason Kelce in. As great as he is, they're not going to do that on a one-year deal. If he comes back, it's going to be to play for the Philadelphia Eagles. But really, the Eagles need to know what Kelce is doing because depending on what Jason Kelce does, really changes the entire plan along that offensive line because their guard, Isaac Seumola, is also a free agent. And Seumola, this is his chance to get paid. He played well, and he's probably, when you look at the offensive line, he was probably the fifth best on that entire line, which is crazy to say because he's probably going to be one of the better linemen on any other team. But the Eagles' offensive line was just so good this year with Mailata and Dickerson and Kelce and Lane Johnson, where Seumola is probably the least of the five. But do they re-sign him? And I think all of that comes down to whether or not Kelce comes back. Because if Jason Kelce comes back, the Eagles could then allow Seumola to walk and not have to overpay him because you can slide Cam Jurgens, who they drafted last year to be Jason Kelce's replacement. You can slide him over to that guard position. The kid has shown he can play when he's had to step in for Kelce. He's a very good player. He even said he is willing to move to guard next year if needed. So that's an easy transition if Kelce comes back. You just move Jurgens over to the guard position, and you could let Seumola walk. But if Kelce doesn't come back, Jurgen has to be your center. And at that point, you have an opening at right guard. What do? Another option is if you let Seumola walk, do you bring back Andre Dillard? Andre Dillard is also a free agent. If you remember, he was drafted in the first round. You could call it a miss by Howie-Roseman because he has not been able to win that left tackle position, partially because Mailata has just been so damn good. But do you bring Dillard back? Dillard's shown this year he can step in and play guard when he was needed. At that point, you have Jurgens at center. You'd have Andre Dillard at guard, and then the rest of your offensive line is intact. That's an option. But again, this all comes down to Kelce, and it all comes down to how much money do you have to pay Hurts? Can you afford to pay Seumola? One of the big things this year is how healthy the Eagles stayed. It was unbelievable that they were able to have all of their offensive linemen pretty much all season long, with the exception of Lane Johnson taking a couple weeks off before the playoffs and resting up what he needed surgery on, that abductor muscle. Other than that, they were pretty healthy. That's rare. So you better have some depth on that offensive line. So even if you do let Seumola walk and slide Jurgens or Dillard into that right guard position, you better have good backups because the chance of the Eagles going the entire season without an injury again is slim. And the running back position, we talk about how much money do you have to pay Jalen? Well, you got to solidify that offensive line, but then you also have two free agents in the backfield. You got Boston Scott and Miles Sanders are both free agents. I don't see any chance where Miles Sanders comes back. I really don't. I mean, the only way that Sanders comes back is if somehow when he hits the open market, he does not get anywhere near the offers he's hoping to get. If that happens, maybe he comes back to the Eagles on a friendly deal. He's indicated he wants to stay. But I just can't imagine with having to pay Jalen Hurts and then having to make decisions on that offensive line, how you could afford to bring back Miles Sanders. And as much as I love Miles Sanders, in today's NFL, it really just doesn't make sense to overpay for a running back. I mean, you even saw it in Kansas City this year. That Pacheco from Vineland, New Jersey, who played at Rutgers, who had a great season for the Chiefs, they drafted him in the 7th round. You just don't need to overpay. And I've seen people, and we'll talk about the draft in another episode as we get closer, people are already talking about the Eagles trying to draft a running back in the first round. They're not going to do that. You do not waste a first-round draft pick on a running back in today's NFL. But the Eagles have decisions to make. I think you probably bring back Boston Scott. He's not going to cost you anywhere near what Miles Sanders is going to cost. And they have Kenny Gainwell, who really stepped up in the playoffs, shown that he hopefully can be your number one back. If you have Gainwell and Boston Scott, they still have Trey Sermon, who they picked up from the 49ers. He didn't play this year, but from everything we hear, they're high on him. They've kept him around. I think he may get an increased role next year as well if you let Sanders walk, and then maybe you bring in, a veteran or someone of that nature. And then the final decision they have to make is that third wide receiver position. This is where they really could have used help this year. As great as the offense played all season long, that third wide receiver was something that was lacking. Everyone was hopeful that Quez Watkins was going to really take that leap this year and solidify that third option with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and it just didn't happen. Quez finished the year with only 33 catches and 354 yards, and he had some real costly mistakes, if you remember. That game they lost against the Commanders, he had a really big fumble, and we're never going to forget the dropped pass in Super Bowl 57. It would have been a tough catch, but it hit him in the hands. Hurts makes an unbelievable throw. At that point, that was a big, big momentum swing. If Quez Watkins catches that ball, most likely they're going to score 7 points instead of 3, and there could have been an entirely different outcome in Super Bowl 57. But it was plays like that. He just didn't come up big, and I think the Eagles are going to move on from him. If they do move on from him, he has a year left on his contract, but it only is going to cost about $42,000 in dead money, which is nothing, and they would save $2.7 million against the cap. So again, depending on the contracts that have to be dished out to Hurts and some of these offensive linemen, there's a name I want you guys to remember, and that's Paris Campbell from Indianapolis. This guy is a free agent. He was drafted in the second round out of Ohio State in 2019. And guess who the receivers coach was in Indianapolis back in 2019? Nick Sirianni. So clearly Sirianni was high on this guy. His first 3 years in the season, first 3 seasons in the NFL, he had some injuries. He did have some injuries. He couldn't stay on the field. But in 2022, he put together a real nice campaign. He played all 17 games. He had 63 catches, over 600 yards. The kid has potential. That's someone I'd like to see them bring in. If they can move on from Watkins and they can save some money in these contracts they're dishing out, if you could really solidify that third wide receiver position with a guy like Paris Campbell, you become a real difficult team to stop, even more so than you were this year, because you'd still have A.J. Brown and Devontae on the outside. You still have Dallas Goedert at tight end. And now you add a guy like Paris Campbell. Really, it's pick your poison for the defense, because all 4 of these guys are going to be able to beat you. And then that may free up a little bit of not having to worry about a Miles Sanders. If you can run with Kenny Gainwell, you can run with Boston Scott, you can run with maybe Trey Sermon or a veteran guy that they bring in. But be on the lookout for that name, Paris Campbell. But we will see if Howie Roseman, if he's working his magic. I would be shocked if we do not have a deal in place with Jalen Hurts. I think those contract negotiations have been ongoing. I think they're going to try to get that deal done before free agency, which starts March 15th, so that they know what type of flexibility they have. There's also been reports already that Howie Roseman and the Eagles have approached some veterans about restructuring their deals to free up some cap space. Howie Roseman is a cap genius. We know that. He's shown that in the past. So I really think that deal gets done. But like I said, I think it's going to be a 7-year, $50 million a year deal with $200 million guaranteed. And as crazy as that sounds, I don't think it's that outrageous. I think that's fairly team friendly with where this quarterback market is going to continue to go. Let's just look at Kyler Murray. Would you rather have Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray? To me, that is a no-brainer. I take Jalen Hurts every day of the week. Kyler Murray is making $46 million a year with $160 million guaranteed, And that was before the cap went up. That was before guys like Burrow and Lamar Jackson are going to get paid, before guys like Daniel Jones are asking for $45 million a year. So I think 7 years, $50 million a year with $200 million guaranteed is what you'll see for Jalen Hurts. And I think he's well worth it. And I'm happy he's on our squad. But guys, we'll keep coming to you all off season long. We'll have a lot to talk about. We'll start diving into the draft. The Eagles have a lot of picks. Obviously, they have those 2 first-round draft picks. We'll talk about what we think they do with those. We'll talk about free agency, and we still have to address what do the Eagles do at offensive and defensive coordinator. So be sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Check us out on all your favorite social media platforms. We're there, and let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about, but we're going to keep coming. And as always, we'll keep talking about the Eagles. Have a good one, guys.